A lion doesn't roar before it strikes. The strongest man doesn't need to speak to be feared. Some try to intimidate with noise and threats, their emotions loud and chaotic. But true power is silent, unpredictable, and controlled. That's why it's terrifying, because what you can't predict, you can't control. And what you can't control, you fear. In this world, the most feared man isn't the loudest. He's the one who commands the room in silence. His quiet isn't apathy, it's observation, restraint, and mastery. Today, we'll forge that presence through 6 Stoic-inspired mindsets that make others question your every move. Not through tricks or words, but through 6 inner states drawn from ancient Stoic wisdom. Each one makes your enemies second-guess their actions. They won't know your next move. They won't understand who you are. That mystery makes them fear you. Let's begin. They expect a reaction, a flinch, or an outburst of anger. But you choose silence instead. In that moment, the dynamic shifts. Most people react instinctively, defending themselves when insulted, explaining when threatened, or exploding when provoked. That's not strength. It's handing control to others. When your enemy manipulates your emotions, they've already won by stealing your peace. When you argue or defend yourself, you let them into your mind exactly what they want. But picture this: you don't waver. You say nothing. You don't blink. You meet their gaze with calm, unreadable composure. Suddenly, they're the ones exposed, uncertain of what comes next. That's what makes you formidable. It's not noise, but silence that unnerves. Your quiet forces your enemy to face their own weaknesses, holding a mirror to their flaws. They crave chaos. You give them stillness. They want drama. You offer emptiness. And that void speaks truth. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it." When you respond with silence and absolute control, you're not weak. You've already won the inner battle. I knew a man, quiet and unassuming, who never raised his voice. In a meeting, a colleague tried to humiliate him, mocking his ideas as outdated in front of everyone. He didn't argue or react. He simply looked at his attacker and asked, "Are you done?" Then returned to his work. The room fell silent. The aggressor shrank. That silence wasn't weakness. It was a statement: "You can't shake me. You don't define me." That silence broke his opponent more than any comeback could. A man who can't be rattled is untouchable. He doesn't need to prove himself. And that presence commands respect. So, train yourself to stay calm. Master the pause. Let the storm pass, while you stand unmoved. In a world that feeds on reactions, refusing to respond is your most powerful move. There's a presence that doesn't seek permission. It doesn't chase attention or rely on volume, charisma, or theatrics. It's calm, steady, unshakable. That's what makes it formidable. Most men are noise, filling the air with anxious energy, talking too much, moving too fast, trying too hard to be noticed. They crave attention like air, validation like water. They try to dominate the room without realizing true power doesn't demand control, it claims it naturally. A man who stands firm, without explanation or pursuit of approval, unsettles others. He doesn't smile to please or seek agreement. He stands there, alert yet silent, present yet untouchable. In his stillness, the room shifts. People lower their voices near him. Choose their words carefully. Glance at him before finishing a sentence, not because he demands it, but because his quiet strength compels it. That's real power. Not the power that shouts or commands, but the kind that radiates from within, built on discipline, clarity, and restraint. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." A man with unshakable presence doesn't just ignore his enemies, he rises so far above them, they can't reach him. That's why they fear him. I knew a man named Elias, not imposing or flashy, rarely smiling. Yet when he entered a room, people noticed, not because he tried, but because he didn't need to. He moved deliberately, spoke only when necessary, held eye contact just long enough to shift the air. Even in silence, his presence carried weight, as if something profound had been said. In a cutthroat industry ruled by egos, meetings were loud, with people arguing to prove their worth. Elias stayed quiet, waiting until the noise exhausted itself, then asked a single, piercing question. That one question shifted the room from chaos to clarity. It wasn't just his words, it was his presence. No wasted movements, no unnecessary emotions. He was a reminder that in a world of reactions, silence is a threat. People feared his quiet because it was unpredictable, observant, calculated. The most feared aren't the loudest. They're the ones whose next move is a mystery. That's the power of an unshakable presence. It throws enemies off balance, makes manipulators tread carefully, and silences even the boldest voices. To build this, stop performing for attention. Slow your breath. Stand tall. Observe more than you speak. Practice doing nothing until your silence becomes the loudest force in the room. A man anchored in purpose, clarity, and restraint doesn't rush. He makes the world slow down to meet him. When that happens, you don't need to assert power. You are power. People insult you not always out of hatred, but often out of fear. They fear what you represent, your progress, your calm, your refusal to play their emotional games. They attack with words, not to win, but to provoke. Insults aren't about truth, they're about control. They want to disrupt your balance, test if they can break you, gain power by forcing a reaction. But the moment you respond, you give them what they want. No matter how clever or justified your reply, you've handed them your peace. But when you don't flinch, don't explain, don't even acknowledge their insults, their words echo louder in their own minds than in yours. Your silence isn't weakness, it's a verdict, a calm declaration that they don't deserve your response. Nothing stings more than being ignored by the one you tried to wound. I knew a woman named Clara, working in a toxic office where gossip and subtle hostility were currency. Ayela's colleague, petty and vicious, set out to tear her down. It started with sly insults, backhanded compliments, whispers just loud enough to be heard, sarcasm disguised as humor in meetings. Clara never took the bait. She smiled faintly, took notes, focused on her work, and left the room with the same unshakable calm she entered with. Over time, something shifted. The attacker grew louder, more desperate, trying harder to provoke a reaction. But the louder she got, the smaller she seemed. Eventually, people stopped laughing, stopped listening. When you keep swinging at an unbreakable wall, You start looking foolish. Clara didn't fight back or expose her enemy. She stood so still that her attacker crumbled under her own momentum. That's the Stoic lesson. Let fools reveal themselves. Let insults fall into your silence. Let your attacker collapse under the weight of their own insecurity. Epictetus wrote, "If someone speaks ill of you, instead of defending yourself, say, clearly, they don't know me." Don't give them the satisfaction of your anger or clarity. Give them silence. A man who doesn't defend himself is either defeated or so elevated the battle never reached him. Be the latter. Let your silence speak volume. Let your dignity be unbreakable. The next time someone insults you, smile, not because it doesn't hurt, but because their words can't touch what matters most. People fear what they can't predict. They may not admit it, but when you become unreadable, you become a threat. Control begins with information, your fears, ambitions, habits, weaknesses are leverage for others. The more you reveal, the more they map you, manipulate you, shake you. But when you stay guarded, act without warning, and explain nothing, you become a puzzle they can't solve, a question they can't answer, a storm they can't predict. That's what terrifies them. You don't need to lie or deceive, just keep a distance between who you are and what they know. The Stoics understood this. They didn't live loudly or flaunt their desires. They acted with purpose, not for fame. They shared only what was necessary, knowing every revealed detail could be weaponized. Seneca wrote, "Knowing when to speak and when to stay silent is a great art." Silence isn't just wisdom, it's defense. I knew a man named Caleb, soft-spoken and disciplined, never oversharing. When asked about his personal life, he'd smile, answer vaguely, and redirect. Not cold, but deliberate. Some called him mysterious, others arrogant, but over time, they respected him. Why? Because they couldn't read him. They didn't know what angered him, what unsettled him, or what he truly wanted. That made him untouchable. When drama erupted at work, when rumors spread, Caleb remained unscathed. No one could find his emotional triggers or exploit his inner blueprint. He moved like a shadow, leaving others wary of his next step because they couldn't predict his limits or potential. That's the power of being unreadable. Your enemies can't break what they can't touch, and they can't touch what they don't understand. To forge this armor, stop broadcasting your every move. Quit announcing your goals or sharing every corner of your mind. Let others guess, wonder, and misjudge. A man who keeps something for himself isn't hiding weakness, he's holding power. The world has no weapon against a man who walks in silence, wielding his truth like a blade, revealing it only when the moment demands. Let them study you. Try to decode your silence. Exhaust themselves, guessing your next move, while you answer only to your own will. In a world obsessed with words, actions are rare and terrifying. People proclaim their next project, goal, or transformation, mistaking attention for progress. They talk about what they'll do before doing it. But the more you speak, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to stop. But a man who acts in silence, builds without fanfare, and plans without promises becomes unstoppable. By the time the world reacts, it's too late. The Stoics didn't care for words. They lived with quiet discipline. They didn't post affirmations or flaunt virtue. They understood silent action is the truest respect for oneself. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Let others sell dreams or chase applause for ideas while you pursue the reality of success." I knew a woman, Samira, brilliant and resolute, yet so quiet, she was nearly invisible. While colleagues bragged about new projects or future promotions, she worked in silence. At first, they dismissed her weak, passive, forgettable, until her name surfaced as the one who saved the company millions. Suddenly, eyes turned to her. But by then, she'd already moved on, promoted, relocated, elevated beyond their expectations. They were too busy talking to notice her. That's the power of silent action. It shifts the balance without warning and leaves enemies stunned. To cultivate this, shut the door. Work in silence. Let your efforts echo without announcement. Don't warn anyone. Don't predict your greatness. Don't overpromise. Disappear into action and reappear with results. That's when you become a force others can't anticipate. When you act without warning, you sidestep resistance and instill, fear not for what you've said you'll do, but for what you might do next. That silence, that tension, that mystery reverberates louder than any words you could speak. In a world chasing likes, applause, and social approval, most men bend themselves to fit smiling when they don't feel it, nodding when they disagree, softening their truth to avoid conflict. But the man who refuses to conform becomes a threat simply by being himself, not because he's cruel or confrontational, but because his authenticity reminds others of what they've sacrificed. Being true to yourself unsettles those who hide behind masks, not by attacking them, but by reflecting their lost courage. I knew a man named Jace, not loud or rebellious, yet he made others uneasy without trying. He spoke plainly, never softening his voice to please. He ignored trends, wore what suited him, said what he thought, and stayed silent when others gossiped, not from fear, but from principle. Some avoided him, calling him harsh or arrogant. Deep down, they felt pressure, not from him, but from their own inability to match his resolve. He was simply himself, unapologetic and steady, more powerful than any rebellion. That's the paradox of authenticity. It doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it stands calmly, forcing others to confront their own facades. The Stoics believed in living true to your nature, not the world's expectations or the crowd's mood, only virtue, integrity, and harmony, even if it sets you apart. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. You don't need to convince anyone, blend into the crowd, or be understood. Just be yourself." In a world built on performance, authenticity becomes terrifying. To become that force, stop apologizing for who you are. Quit dulling your edges to be palatable. Don't hide your sharpness, speed, or clarity just to make others comfortable. Say less. Mean more. Say no when it's no. Walk away when it's over. Never apologize for the standards you hold, as long as you hold them for yourself first. When you become unyielding, unchanged by attention or applause, you walk in peace and with a quiet weight that makes the insecure adjust their masks before you see through them. You don't fight your enemies, you become the man who unnerves them just by existing. No weakness, no drama. Just silence forged through discipline. The most feared man isn't the loudest, but the one who doesn't need to speak. Let your silence be your voice. Let your boundaries resound. Let your silence inflict the wound they never expected. By the time they grasp who you are, you're already gone quiet, focused, untouchable. If this stirs something deep within you, if you feel the pull toward this silent strength, leave a comment. I'm done explaining. I act and move forward, not because anyone demands it, but because you're tired of settling for less. Welcome to the world of quiet power.